Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's a stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. We are grateful to have you with us today. It's a great day. It's a Saturday after a Notre Dame victory day. I have not had this experience in a number of years. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Some details about my trials and tribulations and victories down in Miami at the Orange Bowl with the Friend family trio of my dad, myself, and my son, who, as I left you all on Thursday. Thank you all for joining us today, because the American Radicals Podcast comes to you Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Always grateful to have you with the Saturday, because we like to be part of your weekend. We come to you at 10:30 every single one of those times, and you can always smash the thumbs up and give us a follow. We really appreciate it. Over 4,000 followers right now. If you listen to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, then make sure you give us a subscribe so you can get the show as we drop it to you. I am sitting in the chair solo. It is a At Real Steve Friend solo edition of the American Radicals Podcast today, where we're going to be talking about turning over a new leaf, ? Because we just got over the hump on Friday, which was Quitter's Day. That's the nationally recognized day where everybody basically gives up on their New Year's resolution. It's the second Friday of January. Are you still working out in the gym? I'm noticing that there's been a fall off. Seems like the trends have continued and people have fallen over and they've not kept up with their resolution and they've not actually turned over the new leaf. So we're going to talk about today some of the things we're seeing in the news and in politics. And people seem to want to turn over a new leaf. High, prominent, well-known individuals, people like Mark Zuckerberg and John Fetterman and John Cornyn. But I'm nothing if not a cynic, and I do not believe them. And I want to make sure that I'm telling you to have a wary eye. Do not have the rosy colored glasses over your face, because at their core, a lot of these people just are not good faith actors. We're going to get into all of that. But before we do, I've got to tell you all the story of my trip down to Miami. We closed it out on Thursday. I hightailed it down to my kids' school, picked up my eldest son. We're going to drive down to meet my dad at the Orange Bowl in Miami. Looking forward to it. Hadn't been to a college football game in a number of years. I had never brought my son to see my alma mater. As you can see, I am representing them today. My dad's also an alumni. So we had 3 generations of the Friend family there to enjoy the semifinal college football match. Now, what you have to know is I live in Daytona Beach. It is 3 hours from Miami, from the Hard Rock Stadium where the game was going to be happening. But because the entire world has moved to Florida, and particularly Miami, apparently, in the last couple of years, it took us 5 hours to get to Miami. And then when we got there and met up at the hotel, it took us 2.5 hours to go 12 miles to see the game. So we got there 4 minutes before the kickoff. just out of breath, missed all the festivities, all the buildup, all of the hype, and we're fortunate to be there to see the game, which we saw, which our team won. We felt great, outstanding, until we got to the parking lot. And it took us another 2 hours to get the 12 miles back to our hotel. So when I got home on Friday after another 4-hour drive, I did all the math and realized that, yeah, it was still worth it. It was awesome. It was great. I'm really appreciative of my dad and his college roommate and my son. It's definitely something that we will take with us forever. It was a great memory, and I was just a great thing. It was a great day, and I will never forget it. And hopefully, neither will my son, who now has gotten into my ear by the fact that I need to be saving a lot more for college, because apparently I've started the indoctrination program, and he's going to be a domer too. So, job well done by my dad, because he got me, and we have continued it into the future. All right, enough personal information. Let's get down to business, and let's talk about turning over a new leaf. And I want to begin with Mark Zuckerberg. Now, he's another one of these big tech bros. He is the CEO of Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. And like so many of these guys in the aftermath of the presidential election, when they saw the red wave as it came down, they now want to become stalwarts for free speech. Meanwhile, they're hoping that they can do the Men in Black memory wipe on everything that they have done over the last few years, and how they've weaponized their technological platforms to go after people that they now profess to want to be on the team for. Now, it's sort of an issue where these guys are, at their core, opportunists. I think many of them are communists. And what they're really doing is saying, hey, you're in a position of strength now. When I was in a position of strength and I told you to know your role and shut your hole, and if you don't shut your hole, then I'll shut it for you. But now that the winds of change are upon us, I want to turn over a new leaf. I really want to get into that big tent. Maybe I'll kick out the tent pole so it becomes a big tarp, because there's nothing ideological about it, but we're all in this together. I really want to be on your team. Actually, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff, but we can certainly meet in the middle on this one, right? I want to use your adoration, your default setting, to be a magnanimous individual, somebody who believes actually in free speech and the sharing of ideas, and says, look, you can say something that I disagree with, but I will actually defend your right to say it. And they will use that because it's a cudgel for them. They'll use your better nature against you. And then when the pendulum swings back to what they really want, they'll again default to know your role, shut your hole. So what Mark Zuckerberg came out recently with, and this was reporting from Catholic Vote, talking about Mark Zuckerberg ditching fact-checking, and he's vowing to restore free expression on his many platforms. Billionaire Meta Platform Incorporated CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced that Facebook and Instagram will replace their fact checks with a community note system in an effort to, quote, restore free expression. And this is a direct statement from Mark Zuckerberg. It's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. So the question then becomes, do you believe him? Do you think that for 1 minute, Mark Zuckerberg is not interested in Mark Zuckerberg? Is he really a stalwart for free speech? Is he like Garrett O'Boyle at GOB Actual, who at great cost to him and his family has been a stalwart for the First Amendment, saying that it is wholly inappropriate for government to go after individuals based on their First Amendment protected activity? The government should never be the arbiter of wrong thing. The government should never collude with private industry and weaponize those apparatuses, essentially deputize them as elements of the government to say, no, you can't speak out about a poisonous vaccine. No, you can't speak out about legitimate questions about an election outcome. No, that makes you maybe a terrorist. We have to censor it. Or maybe we don't want you to talk about actual investigations going on into political candidates' children, like a laptop. When we have a proof of concept, we have a track record of history from individuals like Mark Zuckerberg on that particular. Now, Mark Zuckerberg went over to the Joe Rogan Experience a couple of years ago, and Joe put him sort of against the wall, asked him about this. So before we take Mark up on whether or not he's actually interested in turning a new leaf, we have to look at very recent history. Don't allow the Men in Black red flashing light to make your memory go away. This is Mark Zuckerberg sitting with Joe Rogan and having a discussion about his company's censorship of the 51 Spies Who Lies memo that the intelligence community put out in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York
Yeah, we
Post.
had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. I mean, basically, the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have, if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
It got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less.
Well, that's interesting. Seems like Mark Zuckerberg is a complete liar. Because when he actually had the opportunity to be a free expression platform over at Facebook and Instagram, no. Now he tries to defend himself. He tries to be very lawyerly in his response to what Joe Rogan's asking him. Joe Rogan essentially asked him straight up, did you censor this? And he said, no, that was what Twitter at that time, it was called Twitter. Now it's called X. They stopped all distribution. We didn't do that. We just choked it down to the point where nobody saw it, but I mean, you could still share it. Of course, when you were sharing it, it was to echo chamber of one because you were in a digital gulag because your account was blocked off. And of course, he says that they outsourced to fact checkers, which now Mark Zuckerberg says they're not going to do anymore. They're going to let the community notes go on. But at the time, fact checkers were third party, independent, nonpartisan, just really interested in the facts. They were all leftist communists. So whatever they said, because they were the arbiters of the truth, was allowed on those platforms, and whatever they said wasn't. Mark Zuckerberg, though, denied all responsibility because he pushed over responsibility for his platforms to these third parties who were very well-respected globalist communists. So you have to see my sarcasm here as being, I think, well-founded because Mark Zuckerberg's track record, his history was spending $400 million in 2020 to help in the election to knock Donald Trump out. And now he wants to come in and say, oh, I'm buddies with you, Don. Come on. I've turned over a new leaf. Not buying it. Call me a cynic. I think I'm just realistic. I'm a healthy judge of character here. Mark Zuckerberg has been weighed, measured, found wanting, and he's lacking. Similarly, there are others who have been weighed, measured, and found lacking over the last couple of years. Now, one of the big platform issues of the last election cycle was illegal immigration and how we're going to do the deportations. And one of the driving narratives behind getting people's appetite for it, thankfully, was the Laken Riley story, which I refused to allow to be diminished from what we talk about on this program. Now, one of the most disgusting displays that I saw at the State of the Union about a year ago was when the Republicans at the time attended that event wearing the buttons. They wanted to say her name and then exploit that for what they could and move on and forget about it entirely, because most Republicans don't care about illegal aliens streaming across the border and then going out and trying to rape a nursing student when she's out for a jog and then bashing her skull in. But fortunately, a lot of Americans took a lot of umbrage with that. So this story was on the tip of our tongues. It was constantly being referred to throughout the last year. And again, very much like the buttons that the Republicans wore to the State of the Union, they want to reap some political whirlwinds, and they're going to do the next thing. And that is pass some laws that I guess they're arguing are going to put Democrats on their hind legs and they're on their heels because they make them defend some abhorrent things. But I don't think they've turned over the new leaf here. I don't think that they have actually embraced the mindset that's going to be necessary. So let's look at one of the more recent stories that I saw about it. This comes from CNN Politics. GOP-led immigration legislation passes House and first bill of new Congress, but faces uncertain future in the Senate. A lot of ways we can take this one, but a basic breakdown was 264 to 159. Which means that 48 Democrats actually voted with Republicans to support the Laken-Riley Act. This bill, also known as H.R. 29, requires the Department of Homeland Security to detain certain non-U.S. nationals, i.e. illegal aliens, who have been arrested for burglary, theft, larceny, or shoplifting. My question at the very outset is, why do they need to be caught for shoplifting? If law enforcement has any interaction with an illegal alien, they should be deported immediately because they are an illegal alien. They've already broken the law. Why do they get a bonus law? I haven't broken any laws. If I break one, do I get a mulligan? I know the FBI doesn't want that to happen. So on its face, this bill is ridiculous. I might have even voted no on it just on that premise alone because it doesn't go far enough. What it should be is if a representative of law enforcement has an interaction with an illegal alien, they get deported forthwith. We don't wait on them to engage in some sort of theft or burglary or something like murdering Laken-Riley. But for our purposes today, turning over a new leaf. Don't think the Republicans have, and I certainly don't think that the new champion of the political right, which is so desperate to have the talking point that they were able to convince a communist to come back to the light, leave the dark side. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because Republicans get elected to be something. Democrats, socialists, communists, they get elected to do something. So the new champion that we're seeing all over the place is John Fetterman. Let's dig into Senator Fetterman from the state of Pennsylvania. And remember that he does come from the state of Pennsylvania. And I want to break down where he is falling on not just the Laken-Riley Act, but some other things and what could actually be the driving force behind Senator Fetterman's recent moderation, we'll say. And look, I say this as a fellow recipient of the Tablet Magazine Cyanide Award, which I got last year, and was next to John Fetterman and Ayanna Hirsi Ali. One of these things is not like the other, but it's a pretty cool trophy, and I have it on my desk. But before we talk about John Fetterman, let's just let him talk for himself along with another communist, Jamie Raskin, congressman from Maryland, when he was talking about the most recent Laken-Riley Act in the House, which now awaits passage in the Senate. This is from Fox News. We're going to hear first from Congressman Raskin and then John Fetterman's response.
Pick a crime, paste into it a template immigration law covering convicted criminals, and then require detention or deportation of certain persons merely accused of committing the crime or arrested for committing the crime. No due process required at all. This allows us to get up and demonize immigrants.
So what do you say to that? You've signed on to this bill.
Oh, well, I mean, I have a lot of enormous respect for my colleague in the House, but I just happen to disagree on this. And for me, just like my friend and colleague in the Senate, like, it's really common sense. And I'd like to remind everybody that we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of migrants here illegally that have convicted of crimes. And why, I don't know why, who wants to defend that, to allow them to remain in our nation through that? And now if you're here illegally and you're committing crimes and those things, I don't know why anybody thinks that it's controversial that they all need to go.
Doesn't that sound reasonable? I mean, look, this guy's a Democrat. Makes no sense at all when you line him up with the rest of his party, which is left of Karl Marx at this point. But is John Fetterman really having a moment here? Is he turning over a new leaf? He's been doing this for the last year or so, and we just had an election. Is there maybe a political reason for it? Or is he actually just a regular guy who's maybe suffered some sort of stroke, and we didn't really find out who he was until he got into office, which is a whole other thing. The fact that this guy got elected when he arguably suffered a vaccine injury related stroke and beat Mehmet Oz. Maybe it's a question of candidate selection, but he won in Pennsylvania, and now he seems to be pivoting. Is he doing this because he's legitimate, and does he want to do the work that's required of a senator? Does he want to represent all the constituents in the state of Pennsylvania, those who voted for his political party, those who voted for the political rival? Or is he doing this for his own personal benefit? Is he looking at the tea leaves and saying, if I, on its face, actually look like I turned over a new leaf, then I might be able to stay in this spot? Maybe the pendulum is shifting further to the right, and I certainly don't want to face a challenge the next time that I'm up to be elected. I don't know. It's tough to tell. I think the best thing we can do is look at his history. Was there an actual moment that he pivoted and he had an aha awakening? Or is this just sort of rhetoric that we're seeing now because we're in the aftermath of a pretty healthy defeat for the Democrats, which John Fetterman is a member of their party? So did my own homework, and pulled up a little bit of background on John Fetterman, some video form. And this is from his campaign for office as a senator with him and his wife, who he's very proud of. So let's let him speak about their relationship, about her, about their family. And this is not ancient history. This is 2 years ago. Then at the time, candidate, now Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania.
I'm proud of my wife Giselle's origin story, and I'm so grateful for the sacrifices that her mother made all those years ago to come to this country looking for a better life. Because if they didn't, I wouldn't have the incredible family that I have now and the partner that I have in Giselle. The Statue of Liberty says, "Send us your poor huddled masses." And as long as we remain true to that original sentiment, America will continue to grow and prosper because immigration makes America America. I'm standing in front of a mill that was built on the backs and the blood, sweat, tears, and lives of immigrants that built this country. We diminish ourselves and are never more un-American when we eliminate citizenship for those that just simply want to contribute and be a part of our great country.
So if you read between the lines, and he's trying to be careful with what he says there, but it's fairly easy if you have a triple-digit IQ, John Fetterman is arguing that people who just came to this country for a better life deserve to be citizens. He's saying that illegal aliens should get a form of amnesty, be allowed in, have all their crimes waived aside. The crime, first and foremost, the first act that they took when they came to our shores seeking a better life was to break our laws. Now, take this out of the immigration context and something, closer to home. If you are courting a young lady and the first thing you do is lie to her about what you do for a living or how old you are, or, this is pretty serious. Let's say you are married and then courting another young lady and say, no, in fact, I'm single. When that information comes to light, will that go well for you in that relationship? Hopefully not. Hopefully, this is a nice young lady. But that's the point I'm making. The first act that these illegal aliens took was to break our laws. They can seek a better life. There is a door to come into the United States of America. You got to do it the right way. And they didn't do that. And John Fetterman, just 2 years ago, was arguing, in fact, that they should be made citizens. So you're going to have to really slow your roll on the argument that John Fetterman's turned over a new leaf. I've yet to see the aha moment that he had where, whew, a member of my family was assaulted. I heard a really articulate case made by somebody that was speaking in the Senate well of the chamber. No, we've got nothing like that. And if you notice there, John Fetterman was talking about his wife. Now let's dig into her. She's a Marxist. She's brutally to the left, as is John Fetterman. I mean, his track record was he was a part-time mayor in a small Pennsylvania town, which paid below minimum wage, that job. But he had that was his full-time job. He had no other job. He lived because his parents sent him money. But John Fetterman's wife, let's find out a little bit about her. Now, this is actually a story related to the Laken Riley Act that the House has passed, is now being considered in the Senate. It comes from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And it says that Fetterman is the lone Democratic co-sponsor that led the Laken Riley immigration bill. But a part of this that caught my attention was related to that video I just showed you, that campaign video. Fetterman has been a staunch advocate for immigrants, particularly dreamers, who come to the country as minors. His wife, Giselle, was a so-called dreamer who came to the U.S. with their mother and younger brother from Brazil when she was 7. The family, all of them undocumented, lived in a one-room apartment in New York City. So we have a sitting senator who's married to an illegal alien. Do you think that that might have an impact more so than a conversation with Katie Britt on Fox News, his colleague who he's trying to find common ground with? He married an illegal alien. They have children together. Do you think he might be incentivized to give her legal status? Do you think that that has a greater impact on him? So maybe the pose that he's putting forth, that he's turned over a new leaf and he just wants to be a reasonable Democrat, one we can all get along with. He wears a hoodie, like Steve Friend, right? He wears a hoodie on national news. We could probably get along with him. He's just a regular guy. Or he's a senator from a toss-up state, Pennsylvania. That was the state in 2024. Everyone had their eyes there. A lot of resources went into that state in the presidential election. Maybe it's a 50-50 state. And John Fetterman sees the winds of political change have come through and they've shifted to the right. So he better moderate or he's going to be out of a job, regardless of how many Carhartt hats and hoodies he wears. So spare me again my expectation that these politicians have actually considered the facts and circumstances and come to a different conclusion. Now, I'm an equal opportunity basher here. So in just a minute, I'm going to get to someone on the quote unquote political right. But before we do, let's do an ad read. We haven't actually acknowledged one of the show sponsors for a while. So I want to do that here, especially because I don't have to have a conversation with Garrett and want to make him feel bad for the fact that he doesn't have a Suspendables money clip. So go to m-clip.com, guys, m-clip.com, and you can get one of these money clips. This is an American company in the state of Georgia, been around for a couple of decades, family owned. This is a lifetime guarantee money clips at m-clip.com. You can get all different looks. You can get them to look like they're made of leather. They're metallic. They can get your initials monogrammed on them. You can get Major League Baseball teams. You could also get Suspendables merch, guys. Suspendables. They have our logo and our badge there. All of these things, all of them, store-wide, m-clip.com. 10% off if you use our promo code SUSPENDABLE. Pretty easy to remember. You don't have to just get the suspendable gear. We are in a new year. I know we've got some holidays coming up like Valentine's Day. So, ladies, it's not all about you. Maybe the man in your life needs a nice money clip. Maybe that's why his back's hurting, because he's got the George Costanza wallet. So get him a money clip at m-clip.com. Now, I want to take this over to somebody else. But before I do, actually, now that I'm seeing it, let's go back to Fetterman 1 second. I had this pulled up because I talked about how Fetterman beat Mehmet Oz. And if you remember the debate he had, where it's arguably worse than Joe Biden's performance, when John Fetterman got to the debate stage and they had opening remarks, John Fetterman said, "Good night, everyone." It was that bad. And he was asked in that debate about immigration. So as long as I had the video pulled up, I want to make sure I give this one a play because, again, he is struggling to communicate here. You have to get through it. But his overall message and intent, again, 2 years ago, was pretty clear. So again, John Fetterman speaking about legal immigration when asked on the debate stage about what he thought should happen to the illegals.
For you, Mr. Fetterman, Vice President Kamala Harris says the southern border is secure, yet we are seeing an unprecedented number of migrants crossing. Is the border secure? And if not, what would you do to fix what both parties are calling a crisis? You have 60 seconds, Mr. Fetterman.
You know, I believe that a secure border can be compatible with compassion. I believe we need a comprehensive and bipartisan solution for immigration. That's what I believe. I don't ever recall in the Statue of Liberty did they say, take our tired, huddled masses and put them on a bus and use cheap political stunts about them. I believe we have to develop a comprehensive and bipartisan solution to address our issue here for immigration here.
Comprehensive immigration reform is a code word for amnesty. That's always what the communist Democrats say. Comprehensive immigration reform says, yeah, we'll give you a wall, but first you have to give us amnesty. It's like common sense gun reform, means gun grabbing. It's coded language. The left loves to talk about dog whistles. That is an absolute dog whistle from John Fetterman. And look, he says he's turned over a new leaf. He says he just wants to do his job. He wants to have conversations. That also includes going down, apparently, to Mar-a-Lago. This is reporting from CBS News. John Fetterman is going to be the first Democrat U.S. senator to visit Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Well, this is always subject to change, but apparently he's going to go down and visit the president-elect. The point he does, maybe he's actually going to be the president, so maybe he doesn't actually make the trip down to Mar-a-Lago. One never knows. Democrat Senator John Fetterman, Pennsylvania, has accepted an invitation. Quote, that is the plan. Yes, we're going to have a conversation. It's always just a conversation, right? Let's just talk about things. And I'm not opposed to having conversations. What I am is opposed to having bad faith conversations. And I don't think that John Fetterman is a good actor. Sort of spelled it out here. We have one more on him, and then we'll get to my next punching bag, who is a Republican, allegedly. And this is John Fetterman's score. Comes from Heritage, so it is a conservative organization. They score him on a few of his votes. This was John Fetterman's performance as a senator, 7% score. A few things to remember about him. What John Fetterman voted for. He voted to fund Ukraine, and he voted in favor of Section 702 without a warrant requirement, and he wanted to dismiss the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, the guy who's allowed millions of aliens to stream across the border. So let's slow our roll on John Fetterman, making him the newest, latest, and greatest champion, the one who crossed over and is now going to become a conservative stalwart. He's a politician after all. So let's compare him, though, to somebody else who's a communist and a traitor, and actually someone who professes to be on, quote, our side. And that's John Cornyn. John Cornyn in senior leadership. He didn't actually get the Senate Majority Leader slot. That went to John Thune, who is a younger, dumber version of Mitch McConnell. John Cornyn wanted to be there. He wanted to be in leadership. He spent his whole life to get there. He didn't get the Senate leadership position he wanted, but he's also in cycle. That's another thing to remember. 2026, John Cornyn is up for re-election. And John Cornyn might be in trouble, which is why you're going to see him say, I've turned over a new leaf. Well, he won't say that. He'll pretend that he's always been this way. And he seems to have turned over a new leaf on Second Amendment issues. Shall not be infringed. He does come from Texas, after all. It seems to be pretty consistent in their ideology about no infringement on the Second Amendment, your ability to carry a firearm. And again, I've said it before, and I will continue to hammer this home. The Second Amendment exists in this country for one reason. It is not for hunting. It is not for home defense. It's not for personal protection when you're traveling abroad. The Second Amendment exists in this country because if you don't have it, the government will come to your house and shoot you in the face. There is no deterrent at that point. That is why every despot, every tyrant, every communist immediately takes the guns from the citizens. And John Cornyn now seems to be wanting everyone to have the ability to carry a firearm all across the fruited plain. Reporting here from the Daily Caller about the good senator, John Cornyn is introducing a bill that's going to allow concealed carry permits, reciprocity in all 50 states. Well, that's a good thing. I mean, shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed. Again, I don't know why we need a law, sort of similar to the Laken Riley Act. I don't know why we need a law that says that you shall deport illegal aliens because they broke a second law. I think breaking the first one necessitates their removal from the country. I don't know why we need a law that says, yeah, we're going to double down on shall not be infringed. We pinky swear this time, shall not be infringed is a thing. The bill is called the Constitutional Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act. It will compel states to recognize concealed carry permits from all states as a valid certification to carry a concealed firearm. And again, there's always a debate about concealed and open carry. I never understood for the life of me why people oppose open carry, but are okay with concealed carry. Does it make you nervous for someone to open carry? You know they're armed then. Theoretically, if you're scared of people carrying a firearm, their ability to have it concealed makes them more dangerous because you don't know that they're armed. But it always seems to go the other way, and people are okay because they're scared of guns. Just don't let me see it. And if I don't see it, I put my head in the sand like the stereotypical ostrich, then I can pretend that you aren't armed. But here's a quote from the good Senator John Cornyn. Quote, the Lone Star State has long championed our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, and gun owners in Texas and across the country should not have that fundamental right violated when they cross state lines. I am so glad that now it seems that the senator from Texas has appreciated the fact that he not only comes from Texas, he theoretically lives in America, and we theoretically have a Second Amendment that allows you to keep and bear arms, and it shall not be infringed. Because relatively recently, John Cornyn was saying something different, and I'm again waiting for the aha moment. Was there a direct impact on his life? Did a member of his family go afoul of reciprocity law for concealed carry? Was there an act of violence that he witnessed or heard a story about that brought him back to a new perspective? Because in relatively recent history, like 2 years ago, John Cornyn had a completely different tune. In fact, John Cornyn signed on to the bipartisan bill that tried to take your gun away from you. It's called the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This comes from Gun Owners of America and talked about how this bill was actually weaponized. Big surprise here. Republicans, Democrats in Washington, D.C. got together, got a bipartisan bill, and it ended in infringing on Americans' freedoms. Let's find out about this one. From Gun Owners of America, Justice Department weaponized bipartisan gun safety law to illegally fund red flag laws. This is according to a couple of Republicans who did some digging on it. In 2022, relatively recently, Congress passed and President Biden signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act in response to mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde. Never let a crisis go to waste. The fact that the police, the government in Uvalde, was sitting in the hallway as an active shooter gunned down small children and a teacher, that means that you can't have a gun. Meanwhile, the government, we're going to monopolize force, give them all the guns, and they're unwilling to go into and get into a gunfight. Now, I have a problem with that as a man. I don't care if you're an actor of the state. If there is a active shooter, it is compulsory on you as a man to get into a gunfight, to address that threat, to save innocents' lives. And if you don't have a gun, I'm sorry, you get into a gunfight and you don't have a gun. Sucks to be you. Get a gun, get trained. But back to Uvalde specifically, where you had police officers in the hall of the school as the shooting was going on who refused to go in. And our solution is, let's disarm the American population of people who are well trained and constitutionally guaranteed to be able to protect themselves, monopolize all that force, give it to the government because they'll keep us safe when we have Exhibit A that they don't even keep you safe. Seems kind of nonsensical to me, but John Cornyn said it made sense to him, which is why he was one of the big sponsors of this bill. So again, back to Gun Owners of America. They did this in response to Uvalde and Buffalo. It left dozens dead. Law incentivizes states to pass extreme risk protection laws. Those are red flag laws. It means that we don't have due process. It means that somebody comes forward to a judge and says, I think that that person over there is crazy, so let's take their guns. They haven't committed a crime. We haven't really done an investigation. We'll take the guns first and then do an investigation. And then what they don't tell you is that it's cumbersome, extremely long, that you might never get your firearm back, even though you've been adjudicated as being competent and not really a risk. And it's potentially weaponized. You get a couple of witnesses, they say, hey, we don't like that guy over there. Let's jam him up, take his firearms away from him. At the very least, he'll be on the radar of the government. They'll have their man and they can just go digging and find their crime. But this bill was even more nefarious because it bribed states that are historically opposed to red flag laws to do it, to get the golden handcuffs. Now, the federal government has the ability to borrow and print money forever, apparently. We're actually trying to get rid of debt ceilings. So what's the cost to them? They can just go to the printer and make more money. But the states get those golden handcuffs, get those payoffs, and then they say, all right, we're addicted to that money now. What do we have to do? So again, back to Gun Owners of America, this assessment of this bipartisan Safer Communities Act said that since the passage of this bill, no states have revised their statutes to comply with the due process requirements. They amended the law. They said, all right, you have to have some due process here, yet no states actually made the changes. However, the Bureau of Justice Programs has funded every state that applied with a red flag gun confiscation law on the books without enforcing Congress's due process requirements. So due process was not necessary to get the money, pass the red flags laws, and then after the fact, we'll hopefully get around to ensuring some level of due process. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act grant program is being used by federal government to influence states into enacting red flag confiscation laws because the states want that sweet, sweet government money, and they're willing to take away your rights as an American citizen, your constitutional right to protect yourself against the government, to do it, to get those golden handcuffs. John Cornyn was one of the big pushers of this bill. And now, a couple years later, he wants universal reciprocity. Has John Cornyn actually turned over a new leaf? No, he's in cycle. He's in Texas, and he's under fire. He's under a lot of pressure, actually, and there are some prominent people in the state of Texas who might be able to challenge him. He doesn't want to lose that seat. And I think we're here now, having just passed Quitter's Day, when everybody gives up their New Year's resolutions. I don't think John Cornyn made that resolution to begin with. I don't think John Fetterman made that resolution to begin with. They're opportunists. You have to remain cynical of these people. They're not good faith actors. They're doing what's best for them. They view government very much in the Aaron Burr mindset. Government exists to line my pockets. I'm not really interested in being a civil servant, a public servant, somebody who swears an oath and wants to serve my constituents. How come all these guys get so rich? It's regardless of party. They're there for themselves. So any sort of statement or indication that they give you, behavior, a pose, that they've turned over a new leaf and maybe they're an ideologue going the other way, you have to take it with a very healthy grain of salt, particularly when they exist in a space in the Congress, when they can always vote no and hope yes, because they don't have the numbers. It's easy, especially in the Senate, where they have to get to 60 votes. John Fetterman can probably vote in favor of the Laken Riley Act, knowing that enough of the communist Democrats there will vote no, and he'll actually get the outcome he wants, and then go back to Pennsylvania and say, I was moderate. I tried to work with the other side, but lo and behold, my wife's not going to get deported now. All right, so away from the politicians, I want to take it to the private sector, allegedly. The fact that there's a collusion that goes on with the private sector and government now, we've covered a lot about. We talked about ESG a few episodes back and how it's really a manipulation of our system. We're going to change the term from shareholder to stakeholder. We're going to use DEI, which Garrett was funny to point out how it's IED backwards. I've said it's destroys everything important. Didn't earn it is another one that I like. And let's talk about McDonald's, the president-elect's favorite restaurant, right? They gave him the photo op after all, and that was a great and excellent technique in the presidential election by Donald Trump to put on the apron and hand out Happy Meals through a drive-through window. And there's been a bunch of big, giant Fortune 500 companies who have been put on the X, on the spotlight for their diversity, equity, and inclusion protocols. McDonald's being among them. And McDonald's might be turning over a new leaf, it seems. Could it be because Donald Trump got elected? The winds of change are here? Let's find out about it. This is reporting from Headline USA about McDonald's. McDonald's becomes the latest company to roll back DEI. Rollback is a loose term, kind of broad. Let's find out what they actually are doing. The fast food giant announced a decision saying it would retire specific diversity hiring goals and disband a program that required McDonald's employees to undergo diversity training. So no wasteful PowerPoint presentations, no more saying that we're going to fill all these slots with people based on immutable characteristics like their color of their skin, their genitals, or who they like to have sex with. In 2021, recent memory, like John Cornyn, like John Fetterman, 2021, McDonald's Global Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Reginald Miller. How do you know this guy is a qualified individual? He announced it would be offering executive bonuses based on DEI goals. So if they hired the right number of people who were in a minority racial group or sexual preference, then the executives who did that would get bonuses. So if you're not hiring the best person for the job, by definition, your company's product will suffer. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If I run, I don't have to stretch very far for this. Let's say I run a fast food burger joint, and everyone who's the best at making the hamburgers and frying the fries, like Kamala Harris claims she did, let's say that everyone just happens to be a one-legged midget Eskimo. If I say, oh, I'm overly representing Eskimos and midgets and one-legged people, I better hire a 6'7" Ethiopian bodybuilder for the fries job. Well, he's not going to be making the fries as well. My company's going to suffer. Diversity, equity, inclusion destroys everything important. But McDonald's didn't care about it because McDonald's, their board of directors, their leadership, their management is run by a bunch of communists who buy into the ESG stuff that says that we're interested in the stakeholders. They're not really interested in serving the shareholders, the people who have skin in the game. They want to identify another group who they're not really accountable to, but they can claim they're interested in helping them out. And that way they get to line their pockets and say, look, I hired the right number of members of a minority class. I should get a bonus for that. And McDonald's, back in 2021, recent memory, 4 years ago, less than that, most likely, McDonald's was rewarding their executives. And here's something else that's always bothered me. Every time a company, a large Fortune 500 company like McDonald's, says, we had 500 new positions and we filled them all with DEI candidates. Didn't we do such a great job? That's them bragging about the fact that they discriminated against other people. That's them saying we had 500 new positions and we didn't hire a single white guy for it. That's flat out racist and sexist. But we just kind of say, all right, they're going to do what they do, and let's make sure they get a bonus for it. But now McDonald's is saying that they've turned over a new leaf. They're not interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion anymore. They want to get back to just making hamburgers for the billions and billions out there. Now, back in 2021, they were offering bonuses. McDonald's would pledge they also would fill 35% of U.S. leadership roles with minorities and 45% of its leadership roles with women. Again, those positions would be filled, and McDonald's would brag about the fact that they didn't hire a white guy for those spots. Now, have they actually done that? I actually went to McDonald's website. Now, you would think if they were very proud and prepared to announce that they turned over a new leaf, they might have updated their website. Now, what they did do is soften the language, make it sound a little bit more broad. But if you, again, have a 3-digit IQ, you know what they're saying. So it doesn't say diversity, equity, and inclusion. It says our commitment to just inclusion. Now, on its face, inclusion isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what does this portion of the McDonald's corporate website tell us about its focus on inclusion? And quote, at McDonald's, we believe in the power of our golden rule, treating everyone with dignity, fairness, and respect. This belief is grounded in our values, is the latest heart of everything we do. These values guide our commitment to putting people first and creating access to opportunities for everyone, whether it's our customers, employees, franchisees, or suppliers. We know that inclusion is not just a value, it's a key driver of our business success. Because what McDonald's is going to do is go to their suppliers, the people who give them the potatoes and the ground beef and the ketchup and the buns, and say, we're not going to buy from you unless you hire 35% females, 45% minorities into your leadership. And they have some bullet points here that I was able to dig through and find out just how much the McDonald's is wanting to turn over a new leaf. So again, back to their website. We're likewise committed to embedding inclusion into our recruitment process. So we're going to go back to hiring people based on immutable characteristics. They're going to use AI to create a gender-neutral, inclusive job description. They're going to employ a variety of approaches, nothing specific, but it'll basically be, we'll use characteristics that we're going to say are typically men and white guys, so we can cull them out of the process and hire the people that we think will make us look good on the pictures. And they're going to use a variety of these approaches to reduce the potential for bias. Now, they're assuming that biases existed in the hiring processes. The biases, of course, were against their preferred candidates who aren't necessarily the most qualified. And lastly, we're going to strategically structure interviews and interview guides to help support equity and fairness. There's the word. They got away from diversity, but they said equity and inclusion. It's still there, folks. They're not turning over a new leaf. They're just hoping you don't read. And let's be honest, who has the time to read McDonald's corporate website other than at Real Steve Friend at this point? So let's just continue to be skeptical of all of these people, whether or not they're politicians or corporations. Have they really actually had the aha moment? I think we need to be realistic about that. They haven't, for the most part. They've not yet to identify that for us. Is it just because they're on the X? Absolutely. They could be facing a primary challenge like John Cornyn, or maybe Robbie Starbuck over on X is talking about McDonald's, and they just don't want to take a big social media PR hit. So they come forward and they say, you know what? We want to be brought back into the fold. We want to be like Mark Zuckerberg, who is an out-and-out avowed leftist communist who devoted nearly $500 million to get mail-in ballots in 2020, who says now he's interested in free speech after he ran a social media platform that effectively shut down a true story, and they knew it was true at the time. Is McDonald's any different at this point? No. One more as we're turning over a new leaf on the lawfare. Now, yesterday, Donald Trump finally got sentenced in the hush money trial. Want to make sure I throw this out there. We covered down on it a little bit, but here's what you need to know, at least from NBC. I read it, so you don't have to, but they basically just at this point give you some bullet points. Trump was sentenced to unconditional discharge. Unconditional discharge, which Judge Juan Merchan said he was likely to impose, allows Trump's conviction of 34 counts of falsifying business records to stand with no further penalties. So he got convicted, and the sentence was, that's it. What was the point of all that? Well, we know what the point was. It was to be able to say that we have a convicted felon running for president, or now is the president. That was the point of the lawfare the entire time. We have not turned over a new leaf on our side, though, which is what I've repeatedly called for. I call it mutually assured destruction via lawfare. Don't take that out of context. I'm not interested in violence. I'm interested in an energetic prosecutor, a state attorney general, even a county level, somebody who's capable, not a Fani Willis. Where is the rights Fani Willis, though? Now, for this time, they softened the sentence on Donald Trump because he won the election. What if he had lost? Do you think for a moment that this Judge Merchan would not have imposed some sort of incarceration on Donald Trump and live in New York? Doubtful about it. Now, we're going to have to find out if, in fact, there's an appeals process here. There's definitely some issues with the conviction because the prosecutor may have used fruit of the poisonous tree related to some Supreme Court decisions about presidential immunity. Very nerdy, very wrapping around the axle, not for our purposes today. Our purposes today were for talking about turning a new leaf. And I just really want to continue to say, remain skeptical. Do not just jump on the next champion, John Fetterman or Mark Zuckerberg, whoever they are. You have to look into their history. The trust but verify motto that we got from Ronald Reagan, I think that applies here. I think we need to actually be a little bit more harsh with it. We're not going to trust. We will verify, and we will silo you. You need to have a track record of more than just saying the thing right now that sounds good, because we know when you were put for a decision, when the pressure was on you, you defaulted to what you wanted, and that was despotism. That was communism. And the fact that now your worldview is out of power, and you seem to want to use our default setting to want to be welcoming, to want to be libertarian, to want to have conversations with people and exchange ideas. You want to use that against us. I think that needs to be the presumption before there's any sorts of magnanimous efforts to bring them into the tent, because if you bring them into the tent, they're just going to kick over the tent poles, and then it becomes a tarp, and that's not good for anyone. I do have a palate cleanse for us today, guys. In light of the fact that I sat in traffic for 7.5 hours to get to a stadium for a football game that is 3 hours from my house, I wanted to find something that's related to traffic, just to lighten the mood here, to send us off on our Saturday. Again, reminder to you all, if you have not already, smash the thumbs up and give us a follow here on the American Radicals podcast. So we'll close it out here with the palate cleanse. And this is what happens when you sit in traffic just a little bit too long.
I can't stand traffic jams. You ever sit in a traffic jam so long, you start having evil thoughts, like entering your head, you know, you're just like, stop, go, stop, go, stop. All right, you know what? Someone better be dead right now. At the end of this traffic jam, I'm gonna see a horrific accident with bodies spewed all over the highway, blood and guts raining down, because god damn it, I'm late for church. Gotta get my prayer on.
You should probably not drop a GD on your way to church, but I understand the sentiment. I was definitely sweating that out. We got there by 4 minutes, though. We got the victory. It was a good day. And this was a good day for me, too. Be back with you guys on Tuesday, 10:30 Eastern time here on Rumble, rumble.com. Till then, make sure you have a great weekend. And we'll see you back here, hopefully, with Garrett. Hopefully his voice is back. But we will be back with another episode of the American Radicals podcast next week. See ya.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.